All right, looks like we're live. 1 p.m. on the dot. Welcome back to the final part of our three-part series on sleep. So hopefully many of you have watched and got something out of the last couple of weeks where we've been discussing it at length, all things to do with how to get a better night's slumber and sleep. So the key things we looked at have been the various reasons why we sleep. We've also looked at how much sleep we need, also across the lifespan and how that changes. Sleep's wide reaching impact on our health, and also what regulates our desire to be either asleep or to be awake. So you can go back and replay these from the last couple of weeks by going back and having a look at the newsfeed. And we really suggest that you do that. So it's going to give a bit more context, I think, to today and what we've been covering in today's session.
Yeah.
So today, essentially, I guess it's what a lot of you may have been waiting for, really. I guess it's the handbook, I guess the guide to of how to get a better night's sleep. So exactly what to do in terms of how to get more sleep, so more duration, how to improve the quality of your sleep, so your depth, and also how to get more consistency with your sleep also. Now, we'd probably suggest getting a bit of paper, perhaps a pen as well, as these things really quite literally potentially can change your life.
Yep. Not an understatement.
It's pretty big.
Everything that we've covered over the last couple of weeks, I think, outlines how vital sleep is and how important it is. And what we're going to do for today is break it down into some of the key areas that you can focus on that are going to get you a better night's sleep. And we're going to start by talking about the first key point, which is darkness and how necessary that is for sleep, as well as the reduction of light exposure. So we talked extensively last week about the circadian rhythm, the internal body clock. We explained how the circadian rhythm is regulated mainly by light exposure, so the sunlight, sun coming up in the morning and going down in the evening, but also the impact of other light sources like lights in your house, street lights, lamps, and more, I guess, something that's become a little more of a factor in the last sort of 15 years is laptops, iPads, and phone light as well. So we talked a little bit about when the sun goes down and theoretically things should become darker. This is when a hormone called melatonin starts being released. I think Dan referred to it as a hormone of darkness. And this is when our bodies and brains should start to feel drowsy. When we expose ourselves to the artificial light from screens, technology, and just being out and about late in the evening and having the lights on in your house, the process is interrupted, melatonin release is inhibited, and this affects your ability to fall asleep. So using devices before bed has also been shown to potentially contribute to anxiety. We haven't even covered the content that you might be looking at, but depending on what it is, that's obviously going to play a bit of a role as well. So that brings us to our first couple of tips. So the first one is to dim the lights or turn off lights altogether, maybe even using candles after sunset. And this is in line with the circadian rhythm that we spoke about, the normal wake and sleep cycles. And having the lights on right up until you go to bed can potentially have a really big impact on how easy it is to fall asleep and stay asleep as well. So you sort of said a couple of hours before bed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, I try to at least really 2-3 hours ideally before bed.
Yep.
Try and dim the lights. Like we have in many rooms in our place, we have the ability to actually turn down the intensity of the lights.
Yep.
But also as well as it near as my bedtime, I turn them off and just use candles or even sometimes the torch on my phone as well.
Yeah. I think as little light as possible is a good thing, and especially now that you know that it's starting to get darker around even like 5:30, 6, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have lights on until 10 or 11 p.m.
Yeah.
You need that darkness to really sort of start to fall asleep. So yeah, I'm the same. Sort of once the sun goes down, you know, it's okay to have a light on in the distance or something like that, but try and keep it as dark as you can operate in.
It's really trying to approximate and try and make the inside environment similar to what it is
exactly.
outside, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So.
And yeah, as low lux, as they say, as possible, I think is a good thing. So that's the first tip. Second tip is making sure that you're starting to turn off some of your devices. So phone, tablet, computer screen, probably the biggest culprits, but also TV to some extent as well, before you go to bed. And this isn't just immediately before you go to bed, but in the hours before you go to bed as well. So we just mentioned before, what you're watching and what you're reading and things like that can have a big impact on anxiety levels and being able to relax before bed. But specifically, the bright light that you're getting right into your eyes is going to impact the amount of melatonin that you can produce, which is then going to make it much harder to go to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a little bit more impactful, isn't it? Like being right up there, up
Exactly.
close and personal with you.
It doesn't feel right for me anymore having like really bright, harsh light right in front of my eyes. So there's a couple of things that you can do for this. So most devices now have got blue light filters. I know your phone does, and you can set it up to a specific time. Laptops and tablets should have as well. But I'd recommend setting, if you know that you want to try and go to bed at 10 o'clock, for example, trying to, you know, give yourself half an hour of no screen time before bed is going to make a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Most definitely. Like for me, I have my automatic timers that are set up on my computer and also my phone.
Yeah.
I think it was a couple of weeks ago. I sort of changed those times, so now they come on automatically. The blue light filter at 5:15. I think I've set it for.
Yeah. Again, probably syncing it up with the sunset is probably a good way to go.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Maybe a bit of a self-experiment you can do to see how aggressive, I guess, the light is.
Yeah.
When you don't have the blue light filter, is maybe at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night. Maybe have a look at your screen and then turn the blue light filter off and look at the difference. It's really quite shocking.
Yeah, it is. It's really a harsh, bright light. So, cool. Couple of things there. I think the other important factor as well is not bringing your devices to bed with you. So, checking your phone or your email just before you're about to literally turn the light off and go to sleep is not a good idea.
It's light, but it also sort of, you know, wakes you up in terms of stimulating you as well.
Yeah,
right?
You need to be present, and, you know, if you're checking emails, you know, you're not just going to be absent-mindedly doing that. You're going to be focused on it and not relaxing, not in a sleeping sort of environment. I think if you can avoid having televisions in your room, that's going to be a good thing. Not watching Netflix on your laptop or your iPad right before you go to bed is something that's...
I didn't know this really probably until a year ago, that sort of watching like Netflix, for example, on a phone is like a really common thing, you know? Like, so I would recommend not doing that as well, particularly in bed, right? Yeah.
And the tricky thing with some of those services, I know YouTube and Netflix and all the other sort of streaming services, they just autoplay the next show. So you can have it on and it just will keep playing constantly. And if you don't have the, I guess, thought and discipline to sort of say, okay, I'm going to have it until this time, then I'm going to go without it before sleep, it can definitely impact your sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The last tip in regards to light exposure and darkness is something that I've actually done in the last sort of 9 months or so with, I think, great effect. So I used to have a bright clock right next to my bed, literally green light straight into where my head is. And I think eliminating bright light sources from your bedroom is a really, really important and easy thing that you can do as well. So things like bright clocks, like I just said, LED lights that might come on when your computer or your phone is charging or your TV's off. Any other sources of technology that's sort of bright lights that you might have. I think making your bedroom for a place of sleep and sleep only. So, not having really bright lights, TVs, screens in a room where we want to try and make it as restful and sleep-inducing as possible.
You want to make it relaxing rather than stimulating, right?
Definitely, yeah.
And I guess as well, we were going to say too that, conversely, it's important to get light exposure during the day too.
Absolutely,
and particularly, I guess, first thing in the morning, right?
Yeah.
And that, I guess, signals to your body and tells a circadian rhythm, I guess, that this is the time you're meant to be awake.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it works both ways. It's not just your circadian rhythm telling you when to go to sleep, but also when to wake up as well. So if you're waking up at 7 o'clock, but you're staying in a dark bedroom until 11 a.m., maybe watching TV or something like that, then it's going to affect your rhythm and being able to fall asleep later as well. So
and your brain thinks, I guess, it's dark, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So something I've been doing recently is as soon as you wake up, open up the blinds, and then if it's before sunrise, it's going to be dark and it's just going to lighten the room naturally. But if it's afterwards, you're going to get that bright light exposure, and going outside, getting a walk in the morning is always a good idea as well.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. For me, like the first thing I do when I wake up is after I use the bathroom, naturally go outside, and even if it's a bit cold, if it's a walk or just getting outside for a few minutes,
standing on the porch or something like that.
I've got a couple of rehab exercises I do right out for my wrist, and I get outside on the balcony and just stand there and do my wrist exercise. And it's a bit chilly, but
so they're the tips in regards to light and dark exposure, and we really sort of can't understate how important those changes can be. And I think in particular the technology side of things can have an immediate impact from as soon as you implement it. So really hope you guys can take on board those little tips.
Yeah, absolutely. Next thing we're going to look at is food intake, and I guess this explores further into the circadian rhythm. And last week we learned that the circadian rhythm, which is our internal body clock, can also be regulated by our meal times. It's mainly regulated by our light exposure, but also by our eating habits as well. So having consistency with our evening dinner time is really quite important. So ideally you're having your dinner, ideally at numerous hours before you plan to go to bed. So we know that when the body is digesting the food that we've eaten, this can take a number of hours, like often up to about 4 hours or so.
Yeah.
In this time, the body directs all the blood flow, or most of the blood flow, to the stomach to digest the food and away from the brain. So we actually want a lot of blood flow going to the brain during sleep to make the sleep as deep and as high quality as possible.
Yeah.
So we know as well that eating late after dark, after the sun's gone down too, we know that this is going to be a much harder time to digest and metabolize the food that you've eaten. This means that your blood sugar is going to be higher the later in the day, I guess, you eat. So this increases your risk of diabetes. And for those of you who do already have diabetes, if you eat later into the evening, you're going to see much more of a blood sugar spike, which is going to aggravate, I guess, and worsen your diabetes control.
Yeah.
So, I mean, with me, for example, I try and make sure that, I guess, my last meal ideally is at least 2 or 3 hours before I go to bed. Yeah. Sometimes that changes, unfortunately, with socializing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, but you're not gonna get this absolutely perfect every single night. And if you're out at a restaurant until late, for example, then it's going to change. But as we're going to touch on later, I think building a routine is a really important factor.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I guess this this moves on to the next few tips that we've got, is consistency. So consistency as much as you can in your dinner time. So consistency there, keeping it regular. Next thing as well, having a look at ideally earlier dinner times rather than later. Ideally not too long after sunset. So earlier the better. And really something we're going to emphasize pretty strongly here is no late night snacking. So for a range of reasons. Absolutely. The main reasons we've already alluded to in terms of your sleep quality, and also a high risk of diabetes as well. That
one sort of seems fairly straightforward to us, but even just having a little late night snack is going to be more poorly metabolized late at night as opposed to during the day, and therefore, keep your blood sugar levels high, increase insulin resistance, and impact your sleep as well, which is then going to have an impact on your insulin resistance.
Yeah, exactly.
So it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle the more you're eating later in the evening, with one thing sort of impacting on the other. So really, really important.
Just try and eat as early as you can in the evening, and sort of have a set cutoff time.
Really. Something you might even want to try is, I know I've sort of done it a few times. It seems to work pretty well. Having dinner at 7:30, and then if you're at home and you're just going to be watching, reading or watching some TV to finish the day, just go and brush your teeth straight away.
I was going to say exactly the same thing.
I don't know if anyone has ever eaten an apple immediately after brushing your teeth. It could be the most disgusting thing of all time. So, brush your teeth straight away. It's going to at least give you a little bit more thought to when you're thinking about, maybe I'll have an extra biscuit if you've already brushed your teeth or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We will say at this point as well, if anyone has any questions as we're going through, feel free to post them up, and we'll address them as we go through, and at the end if we don't get a chance during. Any comments, anyone wants to say hello, it's always welcomed.
Good. The next sort of factor that we're going to be looking at, it ties in pretty closely with what you're eating, but what you're drinking. So we did actually speak pretty extensively last week about the concerns that many people have about waking in the night, potentially with the need to go to the bathroom. So it makes sense then to avoid this problem. Trying to minimize your fluid intake in the latter parts of the day is going to make sense, and using the bathroom before you go to sleep as well. So our next tip is drink most of your fluids before ideally 4 p.m. or mid-afternoon each day. And after this, minimize your fluid intake. Obviously, there's going to be times that's not possible, and if you're having something to drink at dinner or you need to take medication and things like that, we're absolutely not saying don't drink anything at all if you need to, but for example, try avoid gulping down a big cup of coffee or a cup of tea or a hot chocolate. Purely from a fluid intake point of view, it's not a good idea, but then we've spoken a little bit about caffeine's impact and sugar's impact as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I spent Saturday night at my brother and sister-in-law's place. Yeah. And Julie, my sister-in-law, was saying how she's had to, in the last few months, get up sort of 2-3 times through the night to use the bathroom. And I said, why do you think that is? And she pulled out a 1 litre water bottle and she said, I usually drink about 1.5 to 2 of these in the last couple of hours before I go to bed. Surprise, surprise, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And we talked about
it's got to go somewhere.
We talked about it a little bit more, and it turns out that she's having the biggest meal of the day at the end of the day for dinner, and that she usually adds quite a bit of salt into her dinner as well. Right. So which often makes us quite thirsty, right?
Definitely.
So perhaps it's another little side tip is maybe trying to minimise your salt intake at the end of the day too.
Good tip. I like it. So a lot of it sounds pretty self-explanatory, but maybe not having that big glass of water right before you go to sleep, and could make a big impact.
Absolutely. In terms of sort of getting avoiding that fragmentation, avoiding the breaking of that sleep through the night.
And get up lots of times. And speaking of that, the next topic that we're going to discuss is caffeine, and if you refer back to last week's episode or video on sleep, we covered it at length, basically. It was a big chunk of last week, and we learned how it affects our sleep pressure, and blocks some receptors in your brain that relate to a particular chemical called adenosine, which builds up a sleep pressure as the day goes on. And that can block the desire to feel drowsy, so basically keeping you more alert after caffeine intake. We know it's got a long duration of action, so if you're having a cup of coffee or chocolate or even a Coca-Cola or something like that late in the evening, it's highly likely it's still going to be circulating in your system when you go to bed. We know it's a strong stimulant, going to keep you alert. We know that the caffeine is going to impact the quality of your deep sleep. So even if you can fall asleep quickly after having, a cup of coffee or things like that, it's something to think about that the quality of your sleep might be impacted by your caffeine intake as well, which you can't really tell the next morning, but it's something to think about as well, and might be another factor about why you might be waking up during the night as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Caffeine's a powerful diuretic. So for those that don't know what a diuretic is, essentially it impacts on your kidney function and basically makes you need to go to the toilet more often. So drinking a cup of coffee late in the evening is only going to have an impact on that.
Yeah, it's quite a common blood pressure medication. So some of you may be taking a diuretic without actually knowing it, potentially.
Yeah, which is does make it harder when you may have to obviously keep taking the medication you've been prescribed, but
and then caffeine on top of that to make you want to go to the toilet.
Exactly. Yeah. That can be pretty tricky. And the last point as well is smoking cigarettes often or almost always contain nicotine, which can cause light sleep and early waking due to withdrawal symptoms as well. So that's something to think about. Cool. So our next tip seems a pretty obvious one. Ideally, no caffeine after midday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's going to give you the best chance to not have caffeine in your system when you're trying to go to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard and fast rule.
Yep.
So the next thing, I agree, Erica. I think people need reminders for sure. Hence why we're going through these things now. I guess it's really helpful. So next thing we're going to look at is alcohol. So we know that alcohol can really affect your sleep as well, in a range of different ways. And to start with, alcohol is a really strong sedative. So many people see having a drink at night time as like a nightcap. So essentially, it's it's just knocking yourself out though. It's a sedative, and sedation is not the same as sleep. It's very, very different.
Yeah. I heard a little interesting point on that before, and on the sort of topic of sedation. If someone was to hit you over the head with a cricket bat before you go to sleep, knock you out, when you wake up, you don't get the restorative things that come along with sleep when that happens. So, and alcohol works in much the similar way. You don't get the restorative nature of good quality sleep when you've had a large amount of alcohol.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we learned in the first session in part one, I guess, about the different brainwave patterns.
Yeah.
Right, that are associated with different types of sleep and different stages of sleep. We know that when you go to bed, so when you're sleeping, you've got alcohol still in your bloodstream. It elicits brainwave patterns that are really similar to being under a general anesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like Tom just said, I guess it's not sleep.
Yeah,
it's not restful sleep.
Yeah.
So we know that alcohol litters your sleep with little sort of short awakenings through the night, and this ruins continuity. It fragments your sleep pretty much. So it also impacts on your REM sleep, and we learnt about in the first session about REM sleep, the importance of it. We learned that it's important for your emotional health. We learned that it's important for integrating new learnings into your current knowledge and for learning new motor skills too. Mm-hmm. So if you go to bed with alcohol still in your system, I guess these beneficial outcomes from REM sleep are going to be impaired, right? While we're on the topic of alcohol as well, we thought we might sidestep a little bit and take a really quick look as well at the topic of sleeping pills. And we know that a lot of our clients, have been prescribed sleeping pills in the past. Mm-hmm. We know that Ambien is the most common sleeping pill, and like alcohol, it's a sedative. So it induces shallow brain waves that are not similar at all to actual sleep, deep sleep brain waves. So we know that it helps you. We know that sleeping pills help you to fall asleep and get that initial bit of shut eye, but it's not restful sleep at all. We know as well that sleeping pills are really highly addictive substances as well, and your body does habituate to them, and you become less sensitive to them over time, which means that one, they're not going to work as well, and two, you're probably going to start taking more of them, I guess, to get the same effect.
Yeah. Same with caffeine, same with alcohol, same with sugar.
Absolutely, your body's adapts, right?
Yeah.
So there's also substantial evidence too that taking sleeping pills do surprisingly increase your likelihood of all-cause premature mortality, so death, particularly from certain types of cancer. And that's really alarming stuff. And a lot of people that prescribe these things probably aren't aware of the evidence behind them, really. It's pretty strong stuff. So really not a great idea to use sleeping pills. We'd really recommend trying to implement a lot of these sort of strategies that we're teaching all about now, together with other lifestyle habits too. In terms of relaxation, in terms of exercise, those types of things before you start, even considering sleeping pills. So I guess the takeaway point that we started with about alcohol was that if you are going to drink alcohol in the evening, make sure to limit your consumption wherever you can. So keep it less rather than more, and ensure it's earlier in the night rather than later. So it's going to give you the best chance of metabolizing the alcohol before you go to bed. And we were thinking perhaps maybe a glass of red with dinner, maybe a good option, but beyond that, probably not such a great idea.
Yeah, I think that's pretty sound advice. I can see one of the comments from Linda is that you feel like you can sleep like a baby when you've had a few drinks. And I know from my past experience as well, when you might have had a big night out with friends or something like that, you come home, you hit the pillow, and you just feel like you're out straight away. And then next second, you're just woken up in the morning. And I think one of the reasons for that, or we know one of the reasons for that, is that alcohol impacts on the REM sleep, which is the part of your sleep where you're dreaming. And if that's impacted, you're not going to be dreaming, and sleep's going to feel really quick like that. But again, it's not the full restorative quality sleep that we need. So, every now and again, obviously people are going to have something to drink, and that's okay. But if you're doing it regularly and each night, then it will start impacting your sleep for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of mounts and builds up, doesn't it, really?
Absolutely, yeah. Cool. So the next thing that we want to talk about is something that a lot of people have probably never even considered when it comes to sleep, and that's temperature. So your body temperature, as well as the environment that you're in as well. So your core body temperature actually needs to be lower than you might think to induce sleep. And this is why, you might find it harder to fall asleep on a hot summer's night compared to a cold winter's night. Obviously, too far either way is not a good thing either. So I'm not suggesting that you go and sleep outside or something like that, or doing anything silly. But I think probably being in a cooler environment than what a lot of people think about is an important factor as well.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I completely agree. It's sort of you don't want to be too hot but not too cold as well. I know that when I'm out sleeping in the van when I go away camping, for example, and my feet and my hands are just so cold, sometimes you just can't fall asleep.
And that's obviously not a good thing either.
Exactly.
But,
so if we sort of manage that, that's fine. So, gloves and socks, for example.
Gloves and socks are going to be okay. They're not going to have a huge impact on your core body temperature, but keeps it more comfortable essentially. So our circadian rhythm, which is something we've touched on quite a bit, plays a big role in temperature regulation too. So as the sun goes down in the evening, naturally it gets colder. So our body naturally then prefers a cooler environment for sleep. And not getting this, so say for example, sitting in front of a fire or a heater right up until the moment that you're going to go to bed, can definitely impact how easily you're going to fall asleep, which is, when we were doing all this research, something that was kind of new to me. I'd never really considered that as well, but it seems as though from all the research that an environment that's around sort of 17 to 18 degrees seems optimal, which I know a lot of people have their heaters higher than that.
Yeah, well, we live in these sort of climate-controlled bubbles now, don't we?
Yeah,
Really.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got central heating in my place, and I'm not sure if my housemate's watching right now, but Sophie likes to have the heating on about 20 degrees, like, right up until bedtime. And often I'll have a shower at night time and then go to bed, and I'll be lying there, and I'll be really, really warm to the point where I've got the window open now at night. In June.
So I think, it's probably a little bit colder than most people think is going to be optimal for sleep. And we mentioned before, if you've got cold feet or cold hands, it's okay to wear socks and gloves. But remember also as well, and this is probably interesting advice coming from exercise physiologists, that exercise is going to boost up your core body temperature as well. So we're going to touch on that in just a second, but that's something to consider. So a couple of tips that you guys can take away. Try setting your heating settings overnight or even in the evening as well to no more than 18 degrees. It should still be a pretty comfortable environment at 18 degrees. But we know it's going to be probably induce sleep a little bit better, or turn it off completely. As well. And also, if you've got electric blankets, things like that, maybe use them to take the chill off a cold bed, but then turn them off once you get into bed, I would say. You're going to be in a pretty comfortable environment at that point anyway. So, and sleeping with them overnight is probably not the best idea.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hazard as well, isn't it?
Yeah. The next thing that probably sounds a bit counterintuitive as well is, like Dan mentioned before, trying a warm shower or warm bath at night before bed. You may think that, hey, that's just going to heat me up even more. But what actually happens is when you're in a warm water environment, the warm water basically causes some vasodilation of the blood vessels towards your skin. So it draws the blood more towards your skin. That's why you go red when you're in hot water. And away from your core. So your core body temperature is actually going to drop a little bit after a warm shower or warm bath.
Afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's probably going to leave you in a more relaxed state and ready to go to bed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I find. Personally, that's something that really helps with me at the end of the day, is just having like a nice warm shower. It's very relaxing before I lay down.
And the last thing is, we touched on this just a second ago, trying to avoid strenuous exercise in the 1 to 2 hours before bed. So, this is, and again, that's pretty intuitive. If you go out for a quick walk or a jog or whatever it is that's considered high intensity for you, and then trying to go straight to bed, like that doesn't make any sense. So
your temperature is going to be much higher, your core temperature is going to be much higher, but also as well, you're going to be much more stimulated and find it much harder to relax.
Hormones like adrenaline will be a lot higher, and it's going to make it harder to fall asleep as well. So maybe something like some gentle stretching, a light walk around the house, or even just some deep breathing or something like that might be a really good thing, and again, pretty relaxing.
Yeah, totally. Keep the comments coming, everyone. Any questions? If we don't get to all the questions and comments, then we may even be able to sort of record a couple of videos and put them up during the week to answer anyone's questions as well. We've got a few more things to talk about. So next thing we're going to talk about, I guess, the banner, we call it walk it out. So for anyone that's struggling to fall asleep initially when you first go to bed, or if you're waking up during the night and can't fall back to sleep, this section should help you out quite a bit. So if that's the case for you, it's really not the best just to stay there lying in bed. You really need to try and break it up and do something different. So if you're lying there in bed, for anything more than 20 minutes and not being able to sleep, your brain is going to start to associate the bed with being awake, which is ideally not what we want, right? So we want your brain to associate the bed with, two things and two things only. I guess sleep and sex, right? And nothing else. So do you want to add anything to that?
I think, if you're lying in bed for long periods of time, trying things like, getting up, and oftentimes as well, this goes back to like being in a good routine. So, if you normally go to bed at, 12 o'clock or something like that, and then you try and get into bed at 10 o'clock, it's going to make it really hard. You're probably not ready
Yeah.
to go to sleep yet.
Yeah.
So that's a different sort of topic to be able to shift the normal sort of regular routines and cycles. But yeah, lying in bed for long periods is harder to go to sleep than if you were to get up, even if it's just sitting in a chair, low light, read a
Yeah.
book or something like that. Do something that's nice and relaxing, and see if that makes you a little bit sleepier as well. And yeah, take the association of lying in bed with lying in bed awake.
Yeah.
We want it to be the bed, like you said, as a place for sleepiness, and you should be there when you're sleepy, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And often as well, so this actually is our first tip, really, is that if you can't fall asleep, don't just lie there.
Yeah.
And like Tom said, get up, move away into a quiet room, maybe try and read something or do something relaxing.
Yeah.
Something that we know as well, one of the key things that keeps us awake as well is the worry about falling asleep as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So often just getting up and sort of getting out of the room and doing something a little bit different and relaxing can break that cycle.
Yeah.
And also as well, the second thing in this category is try not to fall asleep on the couch. A lot of us have been guilty of this in the past, and so try to avoid that, because your brain will start to learn, the association, I guess, that the couch is the place to sleep and the bed is the place to be awake.
Yeah.
And obviously we want to be avoiding that. So as soon as you feel, and we did allude to this, I think last week and the week before, that when you feel drowsy, just get to bed.
Yeah.
Don't allow yourself to fall asleep on the couch.
Yeah, I think it's a big factor, and again, it makes sense that if you start to fall asleep regularly on the couch each night, your body's just going to get used to falling asleep on the couch.
Yeah.
And then you go to bed and you're wide awake. You're going to get used to being wide awake in bed. So that really sort of flows nicely into our last topic, which is routine and regularity. So sleep experts refer to your bedtime routine as your sleep hygiene routine. It's such an important area to work on and set some consistency. We've covered so many topics that do need consistency regarding what you're eating, your temperature, the light exposure, and then all of this, if you can get it all together nicely, coming together in a nice routine is really going to have a huge impact on how well you can sleep. And I think we covered last week and made the point that if you're waking up at, say you have to wake up early after a short night of sleep at 5 o'clock, you're probably going to fall, be a bit sleepier earlier in the night. And then if you're, falling asleep earlier, then you're going to be wanting to sleep in the next day. And then it means you're going to be, not tired when you want to go to bed the next night. So you can see how not having the same routine every night really does impact your sleep. It's going to directly affect your circadian rhythm and vice versa. So when you have a solid sleep routine, there's no gambling, or there's minimal chances. It's going to set you up and your body up so that it knows exactly, okay, 9 o'clock, lights are off. I'm doing a little bit of light reading, I'm having a bath, and then I'm getting into bed. And when those things start to happen and flow, it just makes it much easier to fall asleep and stay asleep as well.
Your brain knows what's happening.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. It's not shocked that you should be in bed, but you're actually watching a movie on your iPad right in front of your eyes and stuff like that. Yeah.
While we're on this, I thought maybe we just maybe at least partially cover Robin's question that she's asked about sleep and melatonin. So this ties in pretty closely to what we're talking about right now.
Yep.
First of all, Robin, probably suggest going back and perhaps watching particularly last week's.
I think we
covered melatonin and sleep pretty comprehensively. But I guess when we're talking about sleep hygiene and this regularity in your routine, we talked about last week that melatonin is kind of like the starter's gun to the race, with the race being sleep, really. So when melatonin starts being released, it kind of tells the body and the brain to start slowing down. Right? And the idea of this consistency in your routine with your sleep hygiene is to follow that course and to follow that process of sort of running the race, really, to get you to the end, to get you to the finish line, which is, I guess, sleeping.
So. Definitely something we covered in depth last week. So probably, go back and have a watch of that for sure.
Yeah.
So the last tip that we've got, it's probably the most important one, and it sort of, I guess, involves all the other tips that we've put in place so far, but set a regular nighttime routine with consistency around your bedtimes and also your wake times as well. I think if you can start to do that, and obviously it's not going to be perfect 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year, but the more regular it is, the more likely it's going to be, you're going to get a better night's sleep. And if you do vary away from that on one night, it's easy to come back to it the next night.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
The consistency.
Yeah.
So we thought just very briefly we might share what we do as it may be helpful to some of you.
Yeah.
And obviously this is what we'd like to be doing on an ideal day, day in, day out. And obviously sometimes, things get in the way of that.
Mm-hmm.
If we've got a social event, for example, or whatever, sometimes, that happens, right?
Yeah, like I said, it's not going to be perfect every single day of the year. And it probably shouldn't be, to be honest.
Exactly.
You should be out, socializing if you want
life,
to.
right?
And, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So generally for me at about, right now it's about 5:15, as I mentioned earlier, my devices are set up automatically to apply the blue light filter, which really means that I guess my melatonin release isn't going to be affected so much. I usually eat dinner between 6:30 and 7:30, and when I say 6:30 to 7:30, I really enjoy eating, so I do spend that entire time.
It takes a long time eating a meal if you're Dan.
Usually after dinner, so 7:30, lights go off or they're dimmed and the candles start to come on. From there, between sort of 7:30 and 9ish, I'm usually doing work. I know it's not great, but generally I'm on the computer at that time, or just doing some reading for leisure purposes. About 9:30 is when I brush my teeth and get into the shower, and then 10:30 I'm in bed, all the lights are off, closing the eyes and ready to rest.
To sleep. Nice. Mine is, as you would imagine, pretty similar with a few variations. So blue light filters on all the devices from 6 p.m. Ideally, eating between sort of 6:30 and 7:30. Last chance to eat or drink something. Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be perfect every time. Around 8 or 8:30, last check of my phone. So putting that in another room on charge at that point, and starting to sort of, like Dan said, dim the lights or just turn them off altogether at this point. Sometime between 9:30, I try to stop watching TV unless there's a particularly good football match on, and then sort of transition towards reading under a low light. So I have a light sort of behind where I read with a blind that sort of comes over the top that's kind of opaque, so it's not a bright, harsh light from the light right into my eyes. It's a little bit low lux, and I can still read what I'm reading. And then ideally trying to turn the lights off and in bed and asleep by 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And like we've said before, this is my routine, but it's not perfect every night. So when I have football training, for example, it kind of breaks all the rules. Intense exercise before bed. It means that I don't get home until late. It means that I've been having a lot more light exposure. I've been eating probably when I get home later in the evening as well. So in this case, I just do my best to stick to what I know is going to work. So, not then sitting down, watching TV or playing video games, try and do some form of reading or even meditation instead of any screens if this is the case. And it's never going to be perfect, but if you know what your routine is, it's going to be easier to go back to and know what you may not be doing.
Yeah, exactly. The more set in stone is, the easier it is to revert to that and get back to the consistency.
Yeah, definitely.
We've covered a lot there today.
Yeah, probably went for a bit longer than what we thought.
Yeah, a bit longer than what we'd originally planned for, but hopefully it's been really valuable to you all. I think we've covered, most of the questions and things as we've gone through for the most part. It really is worthwhile going back and watching part 1 and part 2 if you haven't already on this series in sleep, because it will cover some of the answers to some of those questions in a bit more depth, I think, as well. We would really encourage you all to send through to us directly via email or on the Glenroe Health Hub page any further questions that you might have about sleep, because it's such an expansive topic, isn't it? It's huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could have spent 10 hours doing this if we wanted to.
Yeah.
So
We're really just scraping the surface, aren't we? Really.
Yeah. There's lots of content to to cover.
We have developed I guess a bit of a guide or a bit of a handbook here, I guess, in a way, with all these different points to take away to use as a bit of a resource for yourselves. So if that's something that you're after, again, just contact us directly, and we're happy to share that with you, because we do feel that's going to add a lot of value, I guess, to your lives, specifically in regard to sleep.
Yeah.
So from there, we're going to say as well that stay tuned, because next month we're going to be looking at another really important area that is important for every aspect of health, but particularly immune function, and that's stress management and how to optimize our mental health. Really, so we're going to be running those next month, which is really quite exciting.
Yep.
One more thing we will ask of you as well. If you have any friends, family, loved ones, people that are close to you that need some help with their health, please feel free to share this content with them. Tag them, invite them to the Glen Ira Health Hub group, because naturally we really want to reach out and help them as much as we can too.
Yeah, it's not just for people that come and see us at Health and Balance. It's for friends, family, anyone that has an interest in health and improving their quality of life, I suppose, as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. This has been good.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.
Yeah. I hope you get a good night's sleep.
Bye for now.
See you guys.